Hey everyone, I just wanted to do quite a short video on what I think is a really powerful aspect coming up for us, which is the conjunction between Uranus and Sedna. Now, many of you are aware of Sedna. I've talked about her in several videos. But just to recap, for those of you who haven't heard the myth of Sedna, she is a dwarf planet. She's really referred to as a sednoid. She has a highly elliptical orbit of 11,400 years. She goes all the way up to the Oort cloud to bring back new information for us here on Earth. And she's moving towards her perihelion in 2076. Now, that's 50 years away, so you might think that's a really long time, which, you know, by some scales it is. But if you have an 11,400-year orbit, it's a tiny amount of time, and she's coming closer all the time. But what's important for us is that Uranus is becoming exactly conjunct to Sedna. Uranus has an 84-year orbit, in late May. It's exact round about the 24th of May, but it will be very tightly conjunct Sedna. It's been within orb for quite some months. It will become conjunct exactly round about the 24th of May, but will be tightly conjunct through May and June, and then from December ongoing into April next year, April 27. And so this is a time of great activation, and it's a really important ingredient, I believe, for these jumps in evolution that we're going through, for sure. So that's why I wanted to do a separate video on this conjunction. So Sedna lived in a village in the Arctic, and she turned down, this is the myth as it goes, there are variations on the myth, but she turned down several suitors. But eventually one day this mysterious stranger arrived in her village, and she was just entranced by him. And so he promised many things within the marriage, and he took her away to a far distant village, but he really failed on all of his promises, and she had very little to eat. It was really a life of scarcity and victimhood. And so she begged her father to come and rescue her. So he came in his kayak, in his canoe, and they set off together. But a huge storm blew up, and in order to save himself, her father threw Sedna out of the kayak, out of the boat, and when she tried to hang on with her fingers, he chopped her fingers off. And so she floated down to the deep. She transmuted into a sea goddess, and her fingers became beautiful new sea creatures of dolphins and whales, etc. And so firstly, a big theme here is clearly the betrayal of the patriarchy, both by her husband, under the promises he made that he failed to deliver on, and also by her father, because in order to save himself, service to self, he was going to sacrifice his daughter. So big theme of betrayal by the patriarchy here, and I'm sure you can see its relevance in society today, but also scarcity and victimhood. Another big theme in the Sedna myth. However, in her transmutation into a sea goddess, she reclaimed her power. She became empowered, and she produced abundance in the sea, new abundance of these new sea creatures. And so this is really a myth for our time. I think that she had to let go of what she thought was tangible security of the past. The boat had always been tangible security, and we may have to do that too. We may have to release some of the old ways, the old systems, the so-called tangible security, in order to discover a whole new state of being. Because this myth of Sedna isn't just that she transformed in any kind of linear, gradual way. It was a complete change of state. It was a complete metamorphosis, which is what we are going through now as humanity, as we move further into the light body and become more crystalline. And so there's some very relevant themes here. We may feel that she's a very distant dwarf planet in deep space. However, I think this is really ringing true for us now. And so she really describes the theme of sovereignty, and I've talked a great deal about that with planets moving into Aries, particularly Neptune and Saturn, and more recently Mars, all about sovereignty. That's true with the myths of Chiron conjunct Eris right now. I've talked a lot about that, about moving from victimhood into empowerment and sovereignty. So these themes are being reinforced by different aspects of astrology very strongly and very clearly, all at the same time right now. So when Uranus comes to conjunct Sedna, and as I say, that's most exact around about the 24th of May, but it's tight May, June, and again December into April next year. This is when we'll feel it most strongly. And if you have any planets or angles between about 1 to 3 degrees of the mutable signs, and those are Gemini, where you'll feel this most strongly, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces, you could really be feeling this, not only as a sense of restlessness and wanting more freedom and breaking away from old patterns and stale habits, etc., but a real opening up of your consciousness, because Uranus I see as the planet of awakening and also ignition. There's a kind of takeoff, because Uranus also is never just a gradual or linear. It's to do with quantum leaps, quantum jumps. And so this is a real takeoff, I think, for our consciousness. It's about truth. It's about clarity. We're moving away from that Pisces energy, particularly Neptune in Pisces, into much greater clarity with the Aries energy, the planets in Aries we have now, but also Gemini gives clarity as well. The combination of those gives a lot of clarity and truth. Higher awareness. Uranus is always to do with higher mind, galactic connections and communication. And this is reinforcing this theme of empowerment. Uranus transits occur when we have already outgrown aspects of ourselves. So particularly if it's aspecting any personal part in your chart, you'll be feeling that strongly. I believe through this period, so it'll last around about a year, we are going to make a lot of deep sea discoveries, Sedna, deep sea, Uranus discoveries. I believe we're going to discover whole civilizations that live in the deep seas, whole ecosystems we've been unaware of in the deep seas, new medicines, new plant life, new species we've never been aware of before in the deep, deep oceans, which we really haven't explored as humanity to any real degree. This is the beginning of that period. I also believe that this could bring about greater communication with dolphins and whales, the new sea creatures that were birthed from Sedna's fingers. And of course, Joan Ocean is just a marvel, a wonderful marvel at this, because she's in her 80s now. But for decades, I'm getting goosebumps because her work is so beautiful. Check out the Joan Ocean film. It's exquisitely filmed. And Joan tells the story of her communication with the dolphins and the whales. And so she describes them as, I believe, 15th dimensional creatures, sea creatures who are leading our evolution. And here we have an ignition of that. So I believe that more people are going to start to communicate with these beautiful sea creatures at very high dimensional levels. And in general, we're going to start to communicate with more other beings that are non-human. Animals, plants, birds, trees, the elementals, the galactic beings we are also galactic beings, remember. We are birthed from stardust. The calcium in our bones, the iron in our blood, all from the stars. this is our galactic family that we are going to reconnect to as well. So this greater sense of multidimensionality, which is very much what this conjunction is about in Gemini, mutable air. People are starting to experience a greater sense of multidimensionality, whether it's tuning into their past lives or their future lives, or, as I say, connection and communication to other beings, other galactic races, etc. This is just the beginning of a whole new level of consciousness, and it's going to be a higher octave of consciousness. It's going to be wider perception. It's like we've lived all our lives with a filthy windscreen in our car that's been really muddy and murky. And now with this aspect in particular, this conjunction between Uranus and Sedna, the windscreen is going to be wiped clean. We are going to have a wider lens on everything, really, on our consciousness, on how our neural networks work. There will be a much greater understanding of consciousness as we move forwards, and big shifts in perception, big shifts in our lens on the world. You know, how we see our reality is going to shift to very different levels from this very singular, contracted 3D linear perspective we've had up to now, broadly. This is very revolutionary energy, very rebellious energy. Uranus is the planet of rebellion and revolution. Gemini is the sign of nonconformism. And together with Sedna, which is this whole new state of being, we are going to be really rebelling against any sense of control and contraction. I mean, remember that this trine, which is now operational by sign, or certainly, as of today, actually, I'm filming this on the 26th, that Uranus has just moved into Gemini. This is now a in-sign trine. Previously, it was an out-of-sign trine when Uranus was right at the end of Taurus. It's now an in-sign trine with Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is right about 4 of Aquarius, and Uranus is just at 1, but they are going to become exactly trine in July. But Sedna is also part of this trine as well. Now, if you go back to the 1960s, and remember when these two planets, Uranus and Pluto, were conjunct around about 1966, 65, 66, this was a time of great rebellion and revolution. There were huge protests across the world. I've talked about this before, of anti-war, we want peace. This was the peace and love revolution. It was anti-Vietnam War. It was a time of it was right across the world. People were sitting in universities and say, we want a more loving world. We do not want war. And this is the aspect which is now blossoming. The trine is a very positive aspect that is blossoming exact in July. And again, you're going to get a lot of that, a lot of reaction and revolution. And it's going to be very interesting, I think, for the children of people who were born round about the 1965-66, who were born with that conjunction between Uranus and Pluto. How is this beautiful conjunction between Uranus and Sedna and the trine to Pluto, the blossoming of their natal chart? How are they going to be feeling about the war, and potentially their children, because they're going to be, 60 years old roughly, and their children may be having to go off to war. How's that going to work? Not that well, I'd suggest. It's very rebellious, revolutionary energy. So the other aspect of this, I think, that's important to note is that with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, they're both air signs to do with the mind, and this can produce a lot of overwhelm, too much information. We're hopping, from one social media platform to another. We've got the attention span of a hamster. It's just too much information. We can feel very jazzed up with this constant multitasking and hopping from one thing to another, and so many demands on our time. But if you think of the antidote to that, Sedna surrendered, and there is deep, deep, deep silence and stillness at the bottom of the ocean. She's the Inuit sea goddess. Profound stillness and silence at the bottom of the ocean. So the more you can follow Sedna's myth and drop into stillness, drop into silence, book stillness meetings with yourself, the better you will navigate these jazzed up times that we have now. That's the antidote. I believe, and I mentioned this in another video, that people will start to speak other languages, Gemini, spontaneously, whether it's light language or new galactic or old galactic languages or ancient languages. The lovely, talented Eileen McCusick wrote to me recently, and she was with some friends, and they all spontaneously started to speak an ancient language, the same ancient language together. So it's not like we have to study a book or a class. It's just an instant download. It's going to be very, very exciting and help our communication with many other life forms on Earth and species. And so this conjunction, I believe, is an incredibly important ingredient for this accelerated period of evolution for humanity, which, as I've said repeatedly, is 2025 to 2027. It's going to go on, of course, to infinity after that. And, we've got a very strong period in 2030, 2032. However, this is the concentrated, accelerated period. And the conjunction between Uranus and Sedna is highlighting that as well. So this is, this is really expanded perception. And think how special this conjunction is, particularly as Sedna comes close to her perihelion, closer and closer. So remember, check your own chart, see where this is happening. 1 degree of Gemini. And by 12 months' time, a year from now, Sedna is she's not even quite at 2 degrees of Gemini. And Uranus tends to hover around a degree point for about a year. So this is certainly operational for the next year. So as I say, if you've got anything between 1 and 3 degrees of any mutable sign, you're going to be feeling this. And you're going to be feeling some, deep pulls towards different levels of consciousness and perception. Also, I think what Sedna will help us with is that she is deeply feminine with this new divine feminine energy coming, also very ancient divine feminine energy coming in to rebalance the overload of the masculine patriarchy. She will bring in also this a connection to our feelings, to our intuition, to get us out of our heads as well. Gemini. Too much head, Aquarius. It's very heady, it's very intellectual. The other thing just to say about this is also that the last time Sedna came close to her perihelion, it was the Neolithic Revolution. And what was happening then was humanity was going from living as hunter-gatherers to setting up small agricultural settlements, small villages. They were starting to build sacred sites at that time, so they were developing a sense of divinity for the first time, certainly in our recorded history. It might have been many, many, many thousands of years ago. We have that, of course, and there's evidence for that, but in recorded history. So it was the beginning of a new society at that time. And that is, I'm getting goosebumpy, that is absolutely what I believe this conjunction between Sedna and Uranus promises for us. It's an initiation, an ignition into a new galactic consciousness and a new galactic society, a new multidimensional society that is going to be talked about in history books. These are incredible times that we are living in. And remember, every thought, Every feeling, every emotion you have right now is putting paint on that blank canvas for creating new earth and moving forwards into this incredible higher octave of consciousness for humanity. So know your spiritual responsibility with this. It's super exciting. So that's why I really wanted to do a separate video on this, because it's such a special and potent ingredient in the whole mix of what we're experiencing right now. God bless. Be back very soon with another video. Thank you for listening.